the tireless work of modern pioneers in truly the superpower working on in the fields of pure science to reveal more of the mysteries of the universe.
On the surface, it's exactly what it says, which is Black Girls Code. They're learning how to code web pages and code programs for robots. So it's that in a literal sense. But figuratively, I think it's a way that we move forward into the future with how we do things, how we innovate, how we bring our essence back to dominant culture, because right now, our narrative is kind of left out of the story. Just to say the word Black girls is revolutionary.
Good afternoon. My name is Kimberly Bryant, and I'm the founder of Black Girls Code. And as the mother in the video said that you just saw in the clip, we believe teaching girls of color to code is revolutionary. But before I tell you about my story and my history as the founder of this amazing nonprofit called Black Girls Code, I'd like to take a step back, about 30 years back, to when I was this young girl that you see in the picture, with pigtails on most occasions, Shirley Temple curls on some occasions, growing up in the inner city of Memphis. As a child of the 60s, I like to think that revolution and radical action was running through my very veins from the time I stepped foot on the earth. I was born in the same month as the revered Dr. Martin Luther King, and a couple of years before his death on the steps of the Lorraine Motel in my beloved hometown. My very upbringing was colored by this change of social upheaval and this radical shift in our common psyche, both in my community and as a nation, that was really fueled by these movements of people that believed that equal access for all was something worth fighting for. This change and radical shift in the social context of our nation, it colored my very trajectory as a college-educated young woman growing up in the Deep South. But little did I know at the time when you would see me on a picture looking like this on any given Sunday, I really would rather have my hair in an afro as opposed to this very coiffed style that you see in a picture. And I really would rather have probably worn a dashiki than those patent leather Mary Janes that you can't see very well, luckily, from this particular photo. But it was kind of odd in a way, and then in ways not accidental, to find myself at the forefront of this new revolution at this time of fundamental change and transition in our society with the onset of the technological and innovation economy. And I bounded upon that as a change agent, not just for girls that look like me, but for women in general. When we look at why coding matters and why this movement to teach women and girls to code is important, it's necessary to look at some of the numbers. The U.S. Department of Labor estimates that by the year 2020, the computing jobs will be 1.4 million in the U.S. alone. When we look at computing and IT technology as a career path, it's currently the fastest growing and also the most lucrative of careers in our economy. And yet, as a nation, the U.S. can only fill 30% of those computing jobs with the current graduates from undergraduate school. Now, if we look at the context of this, what this narrative means for women of color, the situation is even yet bleaker. For myself, I like to think that I was one of the lucky ones. The girl you saw in the picture a couple of slides back was a true nerdy girl. So I excelled in math and science. But what I love about the whole context of this particular TED event is the whole idea of defying the impossible. Because it was indeed an impossible task for a young girl of color growing up at the end of the 1960s who never saw an engineer anywhere in my general vicinity or neighborhood to select a career in engineering and don a hard hat every day and steel-toe shoes, seriously? That's pretty much what I would call the definition of defying the impossible. But I was lucky to be on that wave of this, the first apex, the rise of women in STEM fields. And that wave of women entering STEM fields continued throughout several decades in everything but computer science. So when I went to school in the late 80s and graduated with my degree in electrical engineering, there are about 30%, 36% women receiving computer science degrees. Since that time, that number for women of all colors has plummeted. It's currently about 18% for all women. But if you look at women of color, that number falls off a cliff. Black women only represent 3% of those receiving undergraduate bachelor degrees in computer science. And if you look at Latinas and our Native American sisters, that number is less than 1%. So the burning question is why, in this age of ubiquitous access to digital technology that has really engulfed the entire globe, why are women of color and women in general being summarily bypassed as leaders in the innovation economy? This is the question that Black Girls Code was founded to address in 2011. I entered this, as I mentioned before, as what I like to call an accidental nonprofit entrepreneur. It was not my goal at all. I really was just, as I said before, a nerdy mom, a nerdy brown girl who ended up raising a geeky brown girl who was 12 at the time and really interested in gaming and World of Warcraft and all these things that I never did as a young person. But I was so incredibly frustrated because while she had an unparalleled access to technology that I didn't have growing up, she had no concept of learning how to use the tool for a creation device as opposed to just being a consumer. And while I wanted her to grow and follow in my footsteps to one extent, I did not want her to go down the path that I found as being one of the one and only in my career for decades and decades to come. So I decided to do something to address this issue by founding Black Girls Code. And our mission is really to empower girls of color ages 7 to 17 to embrace the current tech marketplace as both builders and creators. And we do this by introducing them to skills in computer programming and technology. Our goal overall, in a nutshell, is to teach 1 million girls to code by the year 2040 and becoming the de facto Girl Scouts of technology. Since we were founded in April 2011, we've bounded upon this whole wave of the Learn to Code movement, and we've kind of had a take no prisoners approach. We remain still one of the only organizations out of many, some of which you see here, and may sound familiar, but the only one with a focus solely on teaching girls of color to code and become creators. Since 2011, we've expanded from our very humble beginnings in the Bayview Hunters Point part of San Francisco. We started with only 12 students, ages 6 to about 13, and have quickly expanded to chapters in over 7 cities across the nation, and even 1 international chapter in Johannesburg. We've reached to date almost 2,000 girls and counting, and our numbers continue to grow. Our whole defining mission is to redefine this discussion of both race, gender, and the intersectionality of that as it outlays and plays with closing the digital divide and providing access to girls of color. One of the things that keeps me going, and Mike alluded to it a little bit, I travel all over the world training girls and others to train girls how to code. And it gets tiring. So I took a red eye here from San Francisco last night, and I had just come from doing a workshop in New York and taking a red eye to go to Detroit to do one on Saturday. So it's very tiring in terms of a physical sense. But what keeps me going day in and day out are the personal stories of success that we see in the girls that come to our classes. The workshop that touched me the most recently on a large and broad scale was the one we just did in Detroit. I think everyone is aware of the issues that Detroit as a city is facing today. And as the taxi cab driver drove me through the city to Wayne State, where our class was being held that weekend, I couldn't help but seeing the dilapidated buildings and the boarded up windows and all of the communities outlining the interstate and thinking, oh boy, this is going to be a very interesting class. But once we started and we had girls and parents begin to fill up our room at Wayne State University, and they continued to come throughout the morning, we ended up with over 55 girls, all bright-eyed, all ready to code, and already seeing no limitations for themselves as being creators, and having the divine skills and innate ability to create change in both their own lives and their communities. But there are also individual examples and stories of success, such as Ida, the student you see here. Ida entered our program in 2012 as one of the brightest stars in her family of 9 kids, but having absolutely no idea what coding was. In fact, on her very first class, she told me, well, Ms. Bryant, I really don't want to learn how to code, but my family said I should be here. And so I'm willing to give it a try. So Ida went from being a student that was really more interested probably in being a doctor, which is great, to being one of the brightest stars in our classes. She went on to give me a call earlier this year to say, Ms. Bryant, can you help me? I have been asked by my middle school in East Bay to not only train other students, but to host a series of workshops throughout the school year, teaching them both web development and mobile application development, because my teacher saw me teaching one of my fellow classmates how to code. So can you help me? So Ida's story is not an isolated incident. It's actually universal, because we know without a doubt that if we teach one girl to code, she will teach 10 more. Because women and girls are change agents naturally in both their families, in their communities, and indeed in the world. So by giving them this access to skills and career skills and technology, we're changing not just the trajectory of one girl, but we're changing the collective trajectory of communities, like those communities in Detroit, and even the world. And by empowering these young girls to code, we're solidifying the success of our nation for generations to come. So I ask you today to join me in this movement to teach girls how to code, so that we can defy the impossible and bring women and girls to the forefront of the innovation economy. This is a movement for those like Ida and those women who believe the time to bring women to the forefront of technology and the technological economy is now. This is a movement for those like my student, Saida, and those who believe if technology is only designed by white males who represent less than 50% of our collective population, then we're missing out on the skills and ability that bringing a broader pool of talents to the table can provide. This is a movement for girls like myself, girls like my daughter, who believe that the great economic equalizer of our generation, the revolution of this generation, is indeed technology. And by embedding these skills and abilities in our youth today, we can change the nation, one girl, one woman, and one generation at a time. Thank you.